In this lesson, we're going to talk about something called literal select statements and show you how to execute really your first queries that you're going to be doing here. So again, if you're not connected to a server and have Management Studio opened, do that now. And just so you guys know, don't worry about these tables that I have here that aren't part of the human resources or part of the standard AdventureWorks tables. There's going to be something that I'm going to have you run later on that'll bring those tables up. So don't worry if you don't have those now, because they're not actually part of the standard AdventureWorks database that you'll get off of Microsoft's website. So once you're connected and once you're in Management Studio, I want you to click on the AdventureWorks 2012 database and then press New Query. This is going to open up a new query window that is connected to the AdventureWorks 2012 database. This is important because each query has to be connected to a database, which you'll actually see up here. So even though I might be looking at this database here, AdventureWorks 2012, my query window could be set up to any of these other databases on the instance of SQL that we're connected to. But by clicking on AdventureWorks 2012 first and then pressing New Query, it automatically connects us to the database that I was highlighting. So what we're going to do first is something called a literal select statement, like I said earlier. And a literal select statement is a select statement that does not directly query a particular table and return columns, but instead it returns the results of a string or mathematical expression or something like that. So in essence, it's a select statement that's not querying a table directly. So we're not going to be returning specific columns and rows of data from a table. So the first one that we're going to work with is, let's just write our name. So all select statements start with the select clause, which you'll notice once I finish it, it turns blue when I finish typing it. That's a good sign. That means that this word that we've typed is a reserved word by SQL Server, and that's usually telling you that you did something right. So we type select, and then we said we're going to write our name. So I'm just going to write my name. You'll notice that instead of using quotations to indicate the presence of a string, and anytime we say string in sort of programming and database terms, we mean text. So anytime we use text or string, instead of using the standard quotation symbol, SQL uses the single quote or the apostrophe. And you'll notice that once you press that button, press that key, it turns red. And that's the color that SQL uses to indicate strings or the presence of a string in your query. So keep that in mind. And for every opening single quote or apostrophe, I need to have a closing single quote or apostrophe. Just like when you're opening up parentheses, you can't have an open parentheses without a closing parentheses. Same concept. So all we've done is select and then our name in quotes, in single quotes or apostrophes. Now we want to execute this query. So to do that, we can either press the execute button up here, or if you'll notice in the parentheses of this, the help text that pops up when I hover over that button, it said press F5. So I'm going to press F5 and it executes the query. So the only thing that we see down here in the results panel, which is where all the results of your queries will show up, you'll see Brewster Knowlton, which is exactly what I typed here. Okay, so let's try something else. We could do the classic programming example of saying hello world, and I execute that, and it pops up down here in the results panel. Now let's go back to the full name example. Okay. And let's say instead of having my full name on one row and one column, I want it to be on one row, but I want it to have a column for my first name and a column for my last name. So I want there to be two columns here, one that says Brewster and one that says Knowlton. How do I do that? Well, the comma is our way of telling SQL that we're going to be using another column, or we're going to be identifying that another column is going to be expected. So we can sort of use that comma to create two columns here. So I'm going to type select. I'm going to open up one of the apostrophes or the single quotes and type my name, my first name. and then I'm going to place a comma here, and then type my last name with both closing and opening single quotation marks. Now if I execute this query, you'll notice that instead of being on one column, my name is split out in two columns. And we have first name in this first column, or everything before the comma, and then everything after the comma goes in the second column. What if we have three columns? Well, it's sort of the same concept. So I'm going to do my first name, middle name, and last name all in different columns. So Brewster, I'm going to place a comma here to say I want another column. And do it again for the last name. Again, making sure that there's opening and closing single quotations around the strings that I want to create. And when I execute this query, now you'll see Brewster, Thomas, and Knowlton, my full name, all in different columns. So this is really all we're going to do in this lesson, and we're going to wrap it up here. The next lesson we're going to talk about mathematical expressions. So how do I do 1 + 1 in the query editor, or how do I do 5 × 5, and how do the order of operations play into how my query is evaluated. So that's just a little bit of an introduction into literal select statements, and we're starting to get the hang of using SQL Server Management Studio, and we'll do a little bit more of this in the next lesson.